Fantastic. So thank you so much to Winnie, Caitlin, and Anne-Christine. I'm going to wrap up with some tips and tricks around how we can report sex and reproductive health data and some analysis or analytic methods. Perfect. Cool. I don't have any disclosures. Okay. So firstly, let's talk about how to handle sex data. So like for any research question, I think that it's really important to look into the literature and see whether there is a theoretical justification for sex differences to exist. Now, if you don't find any past literature on that, Winnie made a really good point that, we often haven't actually considered it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't still explore these relationships. I just think that it's very important to contextualize your research question within our current understanding of sex-specific relationships. Then another good thing to do is to visualize your data. So when you plot relationships in the male-only or female-only sample, do unique patterns emerge? There are also a few really simple ways to investigate sex differences in your data. So you can include sex as a regressor or a covariate in your analyses. And this approach assumes that the relationship between your independent variables and the outcome is similar for both sexes, but there's like a consistent shift in the outcome based on sex. Instead, you can look at sex as an interaction term, which is often preferable. This way you can capture sex differences that may change across different levels of the predictor. For example, you might see differences in cortical thickness across different ages for males versus females. Then we can also run sex disaggregated analyses. So run your sample or run your model in the male-only and female-only samples. And this approach is really helpful when you expect there to be a relationship between your independent and variable and outcome that is fundamentally different for each sex. So how should we report sex data? You should do more than just saying you had X% females and X% males. I think it's really important to go the extra step and actually describe your variables of interest for each sex. For example, if you looked at depression scores as an outcome variable, what's the mean, standard deviation, and ranges in the male-only sample and the female-only sample? It's really important to characterize the sample with a little bit more depth. If you can't fit this information into your manuscript, that's fine. That's what the supplementary material's for. If you exclude particular groups based on their sex, it's also really important to report this and justify why. For example, if you excluded intersex individuals. And finally, if you ran your stats and you didn't find any significant differences, report it. Null findings are just as important as significant findings. Now, although this symposium is focused on sex, it would be absolutely remiss for me not to also cover how to report gender. And Armin did a really great job of explaining the difference between the two, so I'm not going to go into that. But if you do have data on gender identity, which I highly encourage you to collect, you should be reporting on it. So it may not be your particular research question, and you may have no idea how to study it, and that is completely fine. In my opinion, the bare minimum is just to report and characterize your sample with regard to their gender and whatever variables you happen to collect. And this then gives the opportunity for other researchers to, who are interested in gender effects to use this information or reach out to you and collaborate. More data is always better. Now, how about analysing reproductive health data? So when looking at this data, there are a few important things to consider. If you want to look at hormone data or cycle phase data, this must be collected at the same time as other variables of interest. Single time point data collection is very rarely going to be useful for any analyses without other important information. For example, if you're looking at testosterone in males, you must consider the time of day in which that testosterone was collected. And in females, if you're looking at sex hormones like estrogen or progesterone, it should be considered within the context of where they are at in their menstrual cycle. Whoop. We're good? Okay. Then if you're studying the menstrual cycle, it's really important to use longitudinal repeated measures designs. It's the best approach because this is a within individual process. Ooh, great. When you're looking at hormonal medications, where possible, don't lump them all into one group. So these medications don't all have the same pharmacokinetic properties, and the same is true for hormonal replacement therapy for menopause. So where possible, analyze the effects of these medications separately. Also, avoid comparing between two stages of the menstrual cycle. There's a lot of variability in hormonal concentrations within each of the phases, so it's important to articulate, within the follicular phase, is the sample ovulating or not? Because you can see there's a lot of different things happening depending on where you are within the phases themselves. So a method that can be really helpful when analysing hormonal data are multi-level models. And this is because they can help you look at average effects in the full sample as well as individual differences in the size and direction of those effects. And you can also model these cross-level interaction terms to identify which between-person characteristics might account for between-person differences. So this can be done using linear mixed effects models if you're expecting a linear relationship, or generalized additive models if you're expecting nonlinear effects. And there are some excellent papers that I highly encourage you to look at the methods for if you're interested in these models, and they've been attached as worksheets to this presentation online as well. So what are the key considerations to report reproductive health data? So I encourage you to, again, characterize your sample in the context of the reproductive health data that you have. So this is not a comprehensive list, and not all of these will be relevant for your sample, but if you can report whether your sample has any reproductive health conditions, hormonal contraceptive use, hormonal replacement therapy, the life stage of your sample, and this will depend whether you're looking at adolescence or midlife or later life. You should be thinking about pubertal development, pubertal stage, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause. I personally think collecting cycle phase during your data collection is just essential. So if you can do that as accurately as possible, that would be brilliant. And it's also important to think about previous hormonal exposure and events, life events, things like gravidity and parity. So I know that this is a lot and it's sometimes a little bit overwhelming, but the purpose of this whole symposium was to highlight the considerations to inspire you to look at these relationships, because there's just so much more left to uncover. And it's a whole world of knowledge that's going to improve our understanding of the brain. And if you're not inspired, that's okay. This may be so out of your comfort zone and maybe interests, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't still collect this data and collaborate with people like us who are passionate about it. So we can all work together to improve our understanding of the brain. So with that, let's move on to some question and answer type format. So you're welcome to come up to the mic, or you can use the app. But I'd love to hear your perspectives, your experiences, and we can chat a little bit more about the panel's experiences. Thank you.